Subscribe to our channel and drop your comments below. Share your thoughts, ask questions, and let's dive into this epic tale of courage and combat together. All the fire's might. The gritty tale of Soviet tankers and British Churchill tanks at the Battle of Kursk in the summer of '43. Picture this. The summer of 1943, the vast plains of the Soviet Union, where one of the most colossal battles of World War II is about to unfold. The Battle of Kursk wasn't just a clash of armies. It was a showdown that changed the course of history. Tanks roared, artillery thundered, and the fate of nations hung in the balance. The Germans rolled out their cutting-edge Tiger and Panther tanks, while the Soviets countered with their trusty T-34 tanks, Su-152 self-propelled guns, and even captured enemy machines. But there's a lesser-known story from this battle that's bound to grip you. The tale of Soviet tankers fighting in British-made Churchill tanks, supplied through the Lend-Lease program as part of the Voronezh Front. These heavy, lumbering beasts were an unusual sight on the Eastern Front, and their story is packed with drama, bravery, and tough calls. Imagine being a Soviet tanker, used to the nimble T-34, now crammed into a slow, clunky British tank, facing down the German war machine. How do you fight when the odds are stacked against you, and the machine you're in feels like a stranger? This isn't just a history lesson. It's a deep dive into a moment of raw courage and ingenuity. We'll unpack the action, sprinkle in some economic context, and reflect on what it all means, making this story come alive for you. So, buckle up, and let's roll into the heart of the Battle of Kursk, American style, to get why British Churchill tanks were rumbling through Soviet fields. We need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. In 1943, the Soviet Union was in a brutal fight for survival. World War II was draining every ounce of the country's resources: manpower, machines, fuel, you name it. The Soviet economy was on a war footing, but even that wasn't enough to keep up with Nazi Germany's military juggernaut. Enter the Lend-Lease program, a lifeline from the United States and Great Britain, delivering everything from tanks to trucks to cans of Spam. Lend-Lease wasn't just a friendly handout. It was a strategic move. The Allies knew the Soviets were taking the brunt of Germany's fury on the Eastern Front. By sending supplies, they could ease the pressure on their own fronts. Historical records show that from 1941 to 1945, the Soviet Union received about 11 million tons of Lend-Lease goods. That included over 400,000 vehicles, around 18,000 aircraft, and roughly 7,000 tanks. Among them were the British Churchill tanks, slow, heavily armored beasts that became part of the Soviet arsenal. Economically, Lend-Lease was a game-changer. Without it, the Soviets would have had to divert even more resources to build their own tanks and planes, slowing down their war effort. But using foreign gear came with challenges. The Churchills were a pain to handle, tough to drive, hard to see out of, and slow as molasses. Soviet tankers, used to their zippy T-34s, had to adapt fast. Yet in the chaos of war, they made it work, and their story at Kursk is one for the ages. The Churchill tank, officially called the Infantry Tank Mark IV, was Britain's answer to the need for a heavy tank to support infantry. Its claim to fame? Armor thicker than a bank vault. The front armor was a whopping 152 millimeters thick, making it one of the toughest tanks of its day. For context, the German T4 had about 80 millimeters of armor, and even the fearsome Tiger had around 100 millimeters up front. But the Churchill had its quirks. It crawled at just 7 to 10 miles per hour on rough terrain. Its controls were a nightmare, and visibility was like peering through a soda straw. Soviet tankers, used to the agile T-34, nicknamed it the Turtle or Barn on Tracks. So, why were these British tanks at Kursk? Simple. The Soviets needed every fighting machine they could get. In the Voronezh Front, specifically within the 2nd Guards Tank Corps, known as the Tatsinsky Corps, there were 227 tanks, including 21 Churchills. These were assigned to the 47th Guards Separate Breakthrough Tank Regiment, tasked with soaking up the enemy's fire and punching through German lines. The Battle of Kursk, fire and fury. The Battle of Kursk was a make-or-break moment. In the summer of '43, the Germans launched Operation Citadel, a massive offensive to encircle and crush Soviet forces around Kursk. They threw in their best. The SS Panzer Divisions Totenkopf, Death's Head, Das Reich, the Reich, and Adolf Hitler, armed with shiny new Tigers and Panthers. The Soviets, tipped off by intelligence, built a fortress of defenses and planned a counterpunch that would go down in history. At first, the Soviets thought the Germans would hit hard along the Kursk-Boyan highway. But when intel revealed the enemy's main thrust was heading toward Prokhorovka, the site of one of the war's biggest tank battles, the 2nd Guards Tank Corps, including its Churchills, was sent to block the way. The night march, a rough start. Close your eyes and picture it. A dark, dusty night. The rumble of tanks creeping along dirt roads. The Churchills, plodding at 7 to 10 miles per hour, stretched the regiment's formation thin. Compare that to the T-34, which could hit 25 miles per hour. The night march was a mess, with tanks arriving in dribs and drabs. 14 Churchills broke down near the village of Krukovo, a common issue with foreign tanks in the rough Soviet terrain. Mechanics worked miracles, getting them back in action by July 6th, when the tanks rolled into position near the village of Smordino, straight into the jaws of 2 German panzer divisions, Totenkopf and Das Reich. The clash at Smordino. The orders were clear. The 47th Guards Regiment was to lead the charge, supported by the 25th Guards Tank Brigade. Their mission? Capture Krapovensky Dvory, cut the road to Belgorod, and secure the area around Shopino, shielding the Corps from frontal or flanking attacks. The signal to attack was a radio code, 444. The battle kicked off with a bang. The Churchills lumbered forward, soaking up German fire. Their thick armor held up against most hits, but when the Tigers rolled in with their 88mm guns, things got dicey. Those German beasts could punch through the Churchill's armor from long range. The Soviet tankers tried to counterattack, but it fizzled. 6 tanks were knocked out for loss for good. Still, they managed to take out 3 German T-4s and 4 88mm guns the enemy had brought up to stop them. But Smordino fell to the Germans. The 25th Brigade was late to the party, leaving the Churchills exposed. The attack collapsed, and the damaged tanks were abandoned as the crews pulled back to regroup. Why didn't the Churchills shine? The Churchill story at Kursk raises a big question. Why didn't these heavily armored tanks turn the tide? Let's break it down. Slow as a snail. The Churchill was built for infantry support, not fast-paced tank duels. Its 7 to 10 mile per hour speed made it a sitting duck against the nimble Tigers and Panthers. Tough to handle. Soviet tankers griped about the Churchill's lousy visibility and clunky controls. Inside, it was cramped, and the periscopes gave a narrow view, making it hard to react in the heat of battle. No backup. At Smordino, the Churchills were left hanging when the 25th Brigade didn't show up on time. Facing overwhelming odds alone was a recipe for trouble. Breakdowns galore. 14 tanks broke down before even reaching the fight. The Churchills weren't built for the rugged Soviet landscape, and spare parts were scarce. Despite these issues, the Churchills did their job. They took the brunt of the German assault, buying time for the main forces to regroup. Their crews showed guts, charging head-on into enemy fire. The tankers, heroes behind the steel. Behind every tank were men brave, often young, Soviet tankers who risked it all. Picture a Churchill's crew, the commander barking orders, the gunner lining up shots, the driver wrestling with the controls, the loader slamming rounds into the breech. In that cramped, noisy steel box, under constant shelling, they worked as one. Many were barely trained on the foreign tanks, yet they fought like veterans. Documents tell of crews who kept firing even as their tanks were hit. One unnamed tanker, his Churchill crippled, managed to knock out a T-4 before his tank caught fire. Stories like these didn't always make the history books, but they show the heart of the men who fought. Economic angle. Lend-Lease's role in victory. Let's talk dollars and cents. Lend-Lease was a lifeline for the Soviet war machine. Roughly 10% of the Red Army's tanks came from the Allies, freeing up Soviet factories to churn out artillery and planes. Without this aid, the Soviets would have been stretched even thinner. But foreign tanks like the Churchill came with headaches. They needed special parts, which were hard to come by, and training crews took precious time. Still, Lend-Lease was a linchpin in the Allied victory, showing how teamwork across nations could beat the odds. The Churchill story at Kursk is more than a war tale. It's a lesson in grit and adaptability. Soviet tankers took an unfamiliar, flawed machine and made it work under fire. They didn't complain, they fought. For us today, Kursk reminds us of the power of unity. Lend-Lease showed how nations could band together for a common cause. It also highlights the human spirit. Those tankers knew the risks but charged in any way. Their courage is a call to face our own challenges head-on. The Battle of Kursk was a turning point, and while the Churchills weren't the stars, they played a vital role. They absorbed the enemy's fire, giving the Soviets a chance to strike back. Their crews showed unshakable bravery, and their story deserves to be told. Subscribe to our channel for more gripping stories from history's battlefields. Drop a comment. What do you think of the Churchill's role at Kursk? What other World War II tales do you want to hear? Let's keep the memory of these heroes alive.